Ori and the Will of the Wisps is a 2D platforming game, filled with awe-inspiring visuals, and a gameplay mechanic that revolutionizes the 2D platforming world. Everything about the game is captivating to say the least. When the title debuted on the Xbox One in March 2020, and later in September for the Nintendo Switch, many critics fell in love with Ori. From a heartbreaking storyline to a new melee system, each updated feature was noted as a refreshing pace for the franchise. For those reasons alone, I could tell that the company was aiming for a more experimental approach this time around. 5 strenuous years were endured during the development cycle, in order to bring the sequel to fruition. And oh boy, do the results prove it! There may be times where the storyline can be overwhelming for your guy. And, this is all due to an abundance of side quests laid throughout the land of Niwen. However, the developer's primary goal for an aesthetically pleasing content has been mastered. Ori takes the player on a whimsical journey, as the stunning visuals become the focal point of each level. This beautiful production, as a result, will leave you asking for more. Despite the many praises though, does it live up to my expectations as a successful sequel? Or, does it pale in comparison to its predecessor? This is my retrospective review on Ori and the Will of the Wisps. Before we go any further, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up, if you enjoyed it. You can also ring the bell to get the latest updates on our channel, especially when new updates and other contents are posted. It would tremendously help my channel. The support will aid in future video productions, and I greatly appreciate your help in between. So without further ado, let's get this review started. Ori and the Will of the Wisp is a direct sequel to Ori and the Blind Forest, which was released back in 2015 by Moon Studios. The Novice company was founded by Thomas Mahler and Gennady Korol in 2010. Before establishing Moon Studios, Mahler previously worked with Blizzard Entertainment. And let me tell you, having that kind of background is already a big deal. Blizzard Entertainment is a well-renowned company for creating classic titles on the Xbox system. To further explore their impressive resume, Blizzard Entertainment are the innovators behind many critically acclaimed games, such as Limbo, Castle Crashers, and Braid. On top of it, Mahler also worked as a cinematic artist for Diablo 3 and StarCraft 2, during his time with the company. His past experience with creating optically alluring contents, encouraged him to eventually build the foundation for the Ori series. And for that, I truly appreciate the team's efforts, and their ability to create a fantasy world beyond what my imagination can uphold. But enough of the history lesson, and let's get to the meat of the topic. After beating the first game, I immediately went to the Nintendo eShop to see if any other titles from the franchise were available. Impatience at this point was an understatement. I was still getting post-credit euphoria from Ori and the Blind Forest, and I wanted it to continue. My eagerness resulted in a persistent investigation. Luckily, Ori and the Will of the Wisps just released on the platform a few months prior. Did I want more than one sequel at the time? Of course! I still do, even to this day. For now at least, I'm happy enough with one other title. Hopefully, there'll be more to come in the near future. Keyword, hopefully. Anyways, returning to my retrospective analysis. Ori and the Will of the Wisps takes place right after the events of the first game. This time though, the setting begins with a narration from the Spirit Tree. The cinematography showcases the forest of Niwen in its state of recovery, as the Spirit Tree continues to explain such progress. The land is once again in a harmonious state, and the returning gang celebrates this victory. Kuro, the main antagonist from the Blind Forest, unfortunately is no longer alive. However, the mother owl leaves an egg behind for Ori to take care of. The egg eventually hatches, and gives birth to a baby owl, all while the creatures of the forest gather around to witness this beautiful new beginning. Ori, Naru, and Gumo decide to name the baby owl, Ku, and they take her under their wing with no hesitation. No pun intended? The scene seems to be going on a bright path. Right? Of course not! This is an epic tale after all. Trials and tribulations have to be marinated in the mix. The tone suddenly shifts when the gang realizes that Ku has a birth defect. One of her wings is lacking a substantial amount of feathers compared to the other. As a result, Ku struggles to fly on her own. This news saddens the group. Over time, Gumo is able to fix Kuro's flying issue by attaching a large feather to the damaged wing. For those who don't catch it right away, this is the same feather that Ori gathered from the previous game, which allowed him to glide through high spots. Ku and Ori then go on a flying spree together to test out Ku's new and improved wings. They enjoy one more moment together before a terrifying storm forces the two to separate. The howling winds causes a large feather to detach from Ku, leading both characters to spiral down in two different directions. Once Ori awakes from the aftermath of the storm, the core gameplay begins here. First, we will go over one of the sequel's newest features, the epic boss battles. The environment feels familiar at first when you explore the forest known as Inkwater Marsh. The controls for moving and jumping are the same, and the art style is gorgeous once again, which I would expect. But that sense of familiarity suddenly changes, the moment Ori encounters a large, dark, and eerie wolf-like monster spontaneously. The monster, otherwise known as the Howler by the Maki tribe, roars angrily, and it is your job to help Ori escape the scene with little to no room for error. Ori is eventually cornered to a broken tree, after a tense and excruciating chase gameplay. Just when you think that the scene is over, you are then forced to combat the wolf. What? Battle the Howler? Is this the first introduction to boss battles? The answer is yes. One new feature that I definitely admire is the addition to boss battles. They can appear at either midway, or before the end of a dungeon stage. The lingering thought of not knowing when it is time to face a boss, added much more excitement in my opinion. With Ori and the Blind Forest, I felt that the end-level obstacles were a bit lacking. Sure, the sense of escaping a tomb, or a landscape in the process of destruction, reminds me of a Temple Run scene in Indiana Jones. The high level and difficulty makes it all worth it too, after my 100th attempt to escape is finally successful. This unique design was endearing in the first game, but I wanted more. I longed for a combat system between larger bosses, like your traditional Metroidvania game. Thankfully, Moon Studios listened to the fans, and developed quite the amount of intricate boss levels throughout the map of Niwen. And when I say intricate, I'm not joking. These boss fights can be infuriating to manage at times. Every second counts, and the slightest mistake will result in having to start over again. But overcoming this difficulty makes the win even more satisfying, once you are able to defeat such monstrous titans. You can finally take a moment of relief when the moment does come. Well, as the story progresses, you will be greeted by Qualik, at Luma Pools. As Ori converses with Qualik, the player learns about the importance of these large omniscient creatures, and their role as ancient guardians to the land of Niwen. However, since Niwen has fallen under decay from the missing Wisps, a strong dark force has taken over the land. As a result, many of the guardians protecting the Wisps have transformed into evil entities, and it is your responsibility to fight them until the Wisps are purified from the decay. Ori is also given the task to recover the 3 missing Wisps, in order to bring Niwen back to its glorious state. This is a great approach to expanding Ori's gameplay mechanic. The impressionist-style artwork of the stage, along with the multi-step combat system, results in one of my favorite all-time boss battles across all games. It's a unique gaming experience that oozes so much technical precision. And, I appreciate the end results. My personal favorite boss fight is with Qualik. When fighting him, Qualik is possessed by a dark force that manipulates his every movement, much like a puppet. You are chased down multiple times, and a brawl ensues until Qualik is able to regain control of his body. Which then leads into ending the dark force once and for all, by crushing it with his own feet. The conclusion is epic, but a sad one as well. The aftermath of the fight has left Qualik with serious fatal injuries. And it appears that Qualik is slowly meeting his own end. Ori tries to comfort Qualik one last time, before Qualik then succumbs into thin air. The scene is crushing to witness, but you must carry on and find the remaining wisps. For a tragic scene like this, how can you not be in awe by this brilliant execution? I can continue talking about the perfect boss battle design, but I will go on forever. So let's just enjoy this end scene for now. In this next segment, we will cover the gameplay mechanics, and how skills are obtained and managed. As mentioned earlier, Ori and the Will of the Wisps is a Metroidvania style platforming game. It primarily focuses on exploration, discovering upgrades, and especially a lot of backtracking to previously inaccessible areas. My least favorite part of this combination is the backtracking. The map is designed like a labyrinth, and the only way Ori can access certain spots is by having to gain a specific skill from one distant area, and then having to retrace your steps back to another faraway section of the map, just to inch further in the campaign. This ultimately leads you in a pendulum state of playing. It can be a time waster, which then generates many head-scratchers moments for me. I'm not a fan of the long dragged out grinding portion of the game, as I spend hours being lost at times. At the end of the day though, I can respect the treasure hunt-like method that Moon Studios attempted to pursue. When it comes to gameplay, you are mainly in charge of controlling Ori, who is a white guardian spirit. Players must use his avatar to jump, climb, glide, and swim between various platforms to solve very complex puzzles. Again, the game unfolds in the form of a Metroidvania, with new abilities and upgrades waiting to be discovered in dangerous crevices. Such upgrades are a necessity to progress in the storyline. If players feel a deja vu experience from the dungeon and boss level designs, it's because some of the foundational gameplay elements were inspired by the Rayman and Metroid series. You can tell that bits of the visuals were rooted to Rayman's aesthetics, while the enhanced melee systems pay a homage to the classic Metroid games. Despite the heavy influences, Ori and the Will of the Wisps still managed to create its own separate identity. And the series stands out for all the right reasons. Unlike the first game, Will of the Wisp relies on auto-saving. In its predecessor, you were able to manually save your progress, through the usage of the soul links. I thought this method was useful when I played the first game, because I was able to turn the game off at any point, and then return exactly where I last left off. However, this ability to save your progress anywhere in the map has been abandoned for a system of shards that can customize Ori's moves. There are saving portals available in some parts of the map, but the numbers are limited. The sudden change in how I can save my progress took some time for me to adjust. Honestly, I really didn't like it. Mostly because there are various obstacles that would require you to start all over again, if you don't manage to go through it with near perfection the first time around, even if it meant being a long rigorous course. Thus, it made the gameplay a lot more difficult compared to the first one. I managed to adapt to the new saving system after the first few hours through the gameplay, but I still largely prefer the saving mechanics of Ori and the Blind Forest. Speaking of new mechanics, Ori and the Will of the Wisp focuses more on their melee system through the shard system. Both new and old moves are introduced to Will of the Wisps. These abilities can be purchased or found throughout the game to upgrade, or to modify Ori's power stats and attack skills. Ori's attacks can easily be accessed through a circular menu. You can also obtain a collection of orbs, which extends throughout the map, to increase Ori's health and energy. Over time, I've come to appreciate how this system works. After watching several other people play Ori and the Will of the Wisps, I realized that having the option to customize your moves, grants for a different gaming experience for every player. For instance, one of my friends mainly uses the archery move to attack distant foes. I, on the other hand, lean more towards using the hammer move to smash enemies with great damage, while using the lightsaber to attack smaller objects. It's an interesting observation to witness. However, it's great to know how versatile the gameplay control works. There's a unique way to experience the game for everyone, so how can you hate the game for that? 30 minutes into the game, and you will have to adapt to this concept right away. The game does a modest job introducing you to this mechanic, and it can be overwhelming. And to be honest, the new control system took some time to adjust for me. Besides the standard walking and jumping mechanic, everything else has completely altered for the controller. Are these changes made for the better? Initially, I felt a bit hesitant. There was only a few weeks in between me playing the first and second game. Therefore, my understanding of the controller felt like a left turn. A few hours would be a good estimate of the learning curve. And because you can't obtain all the moves until towards the end, there will be constant adjustments to how you maneuver your way around each dungeon. Each upgrade though feels badass after you master a new skill, and it felt satisfied every time. I would say the first half of the game is a bit more difficult getting through. But once you gain more than half of the available skills, the game eventually gets easier. It slowly becomes intuitive, and you learn to go with the ebb and flow of things. When I finished the game, I was overall happy with the control functions. So I can't complain too much. The buttons work together seamlessly, making the progression more natural growth. Along with the gameplay mechanic, you are also introduced to the combat and trial runs for the first time. There are multiple of these trials available throughout the game, and it is an option for you to pursue them. Personally, I tried a good half of the combat and speed run trials, and they were fun at the beginning. Towards the end though, I kind of found them a bit more distracting from the main plot, and I abandoned it altogether through the second half of the game. This is where the game can fall short. The Will of the Wisp seemed to experiment with trying to have such an open world, even with the 2D limitations, that it can be overwhelming to deal with the trials and the side quests at times. There's moments where the storyline gets muddy, and I forget what my main objectives are as a result. The side quests and the combat trials can come off as too much, and does little to enhance the gaming experience. Ori loses points for this. One new other factor to Will of the Wisps, that I have mixed reviews on are the side quests. They are an entirely new concept introduced to this title, and I do believe this extra add-on will have a mixed reception from the general audience as well. You immediately notice this when you are able to encounter various small NPC creatures, and have a conversation with them. Not all of them provide Ori with a task though. Some are just there to chat, like the Moki tribe, who approach Ori in small herds. It's so cute when you read the Moki tribes finish each other's sentences. Others, like Lupo, will sell you essential items, such as regional maps to get you further in the game. Much of the side quests do offer great rewards, if you are able to complete them. Also, this is a necessity if you're aiming for a 100% completion. More life energies, combat skills, and shards can be obtained, as a result. I do like the general concept of being able to interact with your surroundings, every now and then. It makes the environment all the more alive. Was it fun in the beginning? Absolutely! I love the multiple expansions to the second game. It's apparent that the company behind the game placed as much effort in making the sequel more innovative than the first. However, just like the combat and trial runs, they do get in the way over time. I only got as far as 70% when I completed Ori, simply because there's too much trading involved, which consists of having to run back and forth between locations, just to complete one task. And the reward sometimes doesn't feel like it's worth the amount of trouble. The map is super big as well. It's so easy to forget one side quest, especially when you're just trying to figure out where you need to go. So the side quests are somewhat of a flop for me. Too much grinding, when there's already enough content in the main game to pursue. Next, we will go over the presentation, which includes visual and audio critique. Can we just take a moment to appreciate the art style for 1 second? I think Ori and the Will of the Wisps truly deserves all the awards, for making such a cinematic masterpiece. From the impressionist painting-like appeal in the art direction, to an epic music soundtrack, this game has it all. For example, I will, at times, just take a breather from playing the game and allow my avatar to stand still in this very much alive environment. The details of each tomb or landscape are so carefully produced, and it is a pleasure in the eyes to observe them. Development for the Will of the Wisps took nearly 5 years to complete, and the end product shows it. Game and art designers from all around the world were brought together to develop the game. If you are wondering how Moon Studios is able to produce a game that reminds you of a childhood adventure classic movie, it's because the assumption is not far from the truth. Many of the art designers for the game paid homage to famous animated films, including Ghibli Studios, who is responsible for creating Spirited Away and Howl's Moving Castle. The directors also relied on the coming-of-age theme from both The Lion King and The Iron Giant. It's no wonder why I easily envision the most epic fantastical journey in my head, the moment I got my hands on playing Ori. The game is simply stunning. You have to play it for yourself. The artwork is so beautiful, and this video doesn't do it any justice. Randomly finding yourself watching a ray of sun shine brightly through a winter forest, or observing the movements of a large bear in slumber, can become a normal habit. The mossy fields of a once dark and scary swamp has now transformed to a gorgeous watermill, and you can just get lost in the whimsical outcome. I have to say that Ori is one of the most beautiful games I reported to the Switch, especially in the indie game department. The developers definitely knocked it out of the park, when creating an everlasting fantasy world that can be agreed upon across all demographics. The world of Niwen is rich with texture, and they welcome you to a visual galore. This type of art style will age gracefully over the years, and that is an accomplishment that's hard to achieve. So well done, Moon Studios! My absolute favorite location is Bowers Reach. This spot is only available once you are able to obtain the skill to blow winds towards your direction with the feather. It's an automatic favorite for me, because I love anything winter themed. Not only are you able to learn abilities to manipulate fire during this portion of the game, but the frozen land concept fits so well with the storyline. It takes me back to the Chronicles of Narnia, as the concept of a world covered in lifeless, but beautiful, snow emphasizes the peril Niwen is under. It makes you question if the White Wicked Witch is responsible for this. The stillness and quietness that is Bowers Reach resonates with me the most. Another favorite location of mine is Willow's End. Willow's End is the final stage on Will of the Wisps, after you are able to regroup all 4 missing spirits. You are required to lead the Wisps here, in order to bring the Willow Spirit Tree back to life from the decay. Before entering Willow's End, Ori must explore Wind-Torn Ruins, and learn the history behind the Willow Spirit Tree. This temple design is the most unique compared to the rest of the map, mainly because the player spends a good portion of their gameplay in a nature-type environment. In contrast, this is the first time in the series that an Egyptian-like dungeon is fully explorable. The climax of the story is near at this point, and you will learn the most crucial information regarding the history of the spirits here. There are hieroglyphics displayed on the walls, which display the necessary information. All written guides are shown in near ruins, as you inch closer to the final match. I think that Moon Studios wanted the game to end on a monumental note, which will have you remembering the final stages for quite some time. To reach this goal, a completely unique dungeon had to be fully realized. Thankfully, both Willow's End and Wind-Torn Ruins provide more than enough content to achieve it. Let's just take another moment to absorb all the beauty that is Ori. So what are my overall thoughts and conclusions? Let's find out in this final wrap-up. Ori and Will of the Wisps is a whimsical game that is very much alive, and always in motion. You can take hours just appreciating every little detail that you can catch attention on. Something as simple as rustling trees is a sure pleasure for the eyes. But don't get too comfortable. The same beautiful environment has a swarm of enemies awaiting your arrival. The main plot of the game, much like its art concept, picks up where Blind Forest left off, and it is your job to save Niwen from chaos once more. Moon Studios did a phenomenal job setting up Ori to an unfamiliar place, with new abilities to unlock, an introduction to a combat and trial system, and new temples to discover. Compared to Blind Forest, Will of the Wisp puts an emphasis on the melee system, making the game more action-heavy the second time around. And I personally believe this is why the second game triumphs over the first one. Ori and the Blind Forest was a fantastic entry to the series, but Ori and the Will of the Wisps improved almost every shortcoming from its predecessor. For that, Ori and the Will of the Wisps is honestly one of my favorite games made for the year, 2020. It's that good! I'm not even a fanatic of Metroidvania style-like games. However, the Ori series has since then changed my mind, so that's saying something. Additionally, the large roster of characters, both old and new, and their development process, are intriguing to follow through. There are moments when I would forget where I lie in the storyline though, because there's just too many side quests going on in between, which can be a downfall for some. However, once you reach the climax and watch how the ending unfolds, you'll be left in a cathartic state of mind. It's so bittersweet, but I won't spoil anything. I think it's worth it to experience the climax of the plot yourself. The great depth in the storytelling helps place the Ori series to other epic titles, such as Final Fantasy or Kingdom Hearts. Much like the first game, the amount of time and effort put into the plot is apparent here. Moon Studios keeps that same approach with the Will of the Wisps, and also introduces a memorable cast of characters to assist Ori in his adventure, along the way. The Will of the Wisps loses a bit of Blind Forest's more simplistic identity, by adding so many new systems. Moon Studios' first game, mainly focused on precise platforming, through the usage of multiple jumping abilities. As a result, Ori and the Blind Forest accomplished that notion with near perfection. Ori and the Will of the Wisps, however, take it another notch higher. And man, they have so much more to offer the second time around. Many of the new moves include fire aiming, multi-level combat arenas, and oh so much more upgrades than ever before. While many might miss the more basic approach to the first entry, I personally find this new approach more refreshing. It helps make the title stand alone strong, which is a definite rarity for many sequels. Ori and the Will of the Wisps is a vibrant platformer genre, and I'm so happy that the technical issues from the first game vastly improved. Absolutely, does it feel like a completely new game of its own? Was the game too ambitious at times? Yes, especially with the excessive side quests, and the combat trials. Regardless, these are minor issues that I'm nitpicking on. The level of difficulty is also up there, with just enough for you to feel satisfied, especially once you are able to beat specific levels of the game. Overall, this sequel deserves all the awards in the gaming world. It's beautifully made, and I only hope for more to come in the future. I give Ori and the Will of the Wisp a strong 4.5 rainbows out of 5. Ori and the Will of the Wisp is a fantastic game to add to your Nintendo Switch collection. Even if you're not a fan of the platforming genre, still give this title a try. You won't regret it. Thank you for watching my first ever review session. If you've made it through all the way, I really appreciate it. If you would like to share your opinions on Ori and the Will of the Wisps, or have any suggestions for the next video, comment below. If you liked my video, please give it a thumbs up also. You can subscribe, and ring the bell to keep yourself posted on the latest content as well. Again, I appreciate your time. See you later!